The late afternoon sun poured through the stained glass windows of the chapel, casting vibrant patches of color across the opulent bridal suite. Anna stood before a full-length mirror, her white gown flowing around her like a cloud. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her veil, the delicate lace framing her face. It was the day she had dreamed of for as long as she could remember. The day she would marry Ethan, the man she loved more than anything. But something was wrong. "Anna, breathe," Sophie urged, her tone gentle but edged with concern. She placed her hands on Anna's shoulders, steadying her. "He's probably just caught in traffic or making sure every little detail is perfect. You know how meticulous he is." Anna tried to nod, but her heart raced. Ethan wasn't just meticulous, he was reliable, almost to a fault. Punctual, attentive, always keeping his promises. This wasn't like him. She glanced at the clock on the wall. The ceremony was supposed to have started 15 minutes ago. The uneasy whispers of the guests filtered in through the heavy doors. Sophie's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Anna, look at me. It's going to be okay. He loves you." But the words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to fill the silence growing louder in Anna's mind. She clutched her bouquet tighter, the stems digging into her palms. A knock at the door made both women turn abruptly. The priest entered, his expression grave. "Miss Anna," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "I need to speak with you." The world seemed to tilt. Anna's legs felt like jelly as she clutched Sophie's arm for support. "What is it?" she whispered, though deep down, she already knew. "I'm sorry, but Ethan will not be coming," the priest said, his words like a punch to the gut. Anna's bouquet slipped from her grasp, petals scattering across the floor. Her breathing grew shallow as Sophie wrapped her arms around her, trying to keep her from collapsing. But Anna pulled away, her voice shaking. "He's here. He has to be here. There must be a mistake." Without waiting for a response, she tore through the door, her gown trailing behind her like a ghostly specter. She stumbled down the grand staircase, ignoring the concerned looks from the guests and the murmurs of confusion. The late autumn air hit her as she burst into the parking lot, her eyes scanning every car, every shadow. "Ethan!" she cried, her voice breaking. "Ethan, where are you?" But the lot was empty. Desperate, she ran to the edge of the property, her chest heaving with sobs. Across the street, a black car sat idling. Inside, Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his face pale and drawn. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, cold and unyielding. "This marriage isn't for you, Ethan. You have your whole future ahead of you, a future that doesn't include her." He had tried to argue, to stand his ground, but her threats had been too much. If he married Anna, he would lose everything: his inheritance, his family's support, his carefully laid plans for a successful career. Now, as he sat in the car watching Anna search for him, her white gown glowing in the dimming light, guilt twisted in his chest like a knife. Anna froze as her gaze swept over the street. For a moment, she thought she saw someone, a shadow, a familiar silhouette, but when she blinked, the vision was gone. Defeated, she sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Her dream had turned into a nightmare. By the time she returned to the chapel, her heart was numb. Sophie met her at the door, her face stricken with worry. "Anna, let's go home." But Anna shook her head. "No," she said, her voice cold and resolute. "I'm leaving. Meadowville, Ethan, everything. I'll never look back." With that, she turned and walked away, her gown dragging through the dirt, the weight of her broken heart heavier than the train of her dress. The morning after her shattered wedding day, Anna sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the suitcase she had hastily packed. The room, once filled with the vibrant energy of her wedding preparations, now felt desolate. Her dress, crumpled in the corner, was a painful reminder of the day she wanted to forget. She had slept in her bridesmaid's spare room, if closing her eyes for a few hours while sobbing into her pillow could even be called sleep. Sophie entered quietly, carrying a tray with coffee and toast. "Anna, you don't have to make any big decisions right now. Take your time." Anna looked up, her face pale but determined. If I stay, I'll suffocate, Sophie. Everywhere I go in Meadowville will remind me of him. Of yesterday. I need to leave. Sophie sat beside her, squeezing her hand. Where will you go? Anywhere but here, Anna replied. Somewhere far away, where no one knows me or what happened. After hours of tearful goodbyes, Anna boarded a bus heading toward the coastal town of Clearwater. As the countryside blurred past her window, she stared at her reflection. The woman she saw looked fragile, broken, but inside, a tiny ember of resolve began to glow. Clearwater welcomed her with a brisk sea breeze and the cries of seagulls. The town was quaint, a patchwork of pastel-colored homes, cobblestone streets, and the salty aroma of the ocean. Anna stepped off the bus, her single suitcase in hand, feeling both lost and hopeful. She found a room to rent above a small bookstore. The landlord, an elderly woman named Marjorie, took one look at Anna and seemed to understand without needing an explanation. You'll find what you're looking for here, she said with a knowing smile. Anna's first weeks in Clearwater were challenging. She took a job as a waitress at the Driftwood Cafe, a cozy spot by the harbor. The work was grueling, and the long hours left her exhausted. Each night she collapsed into bed, her feet aching and her mind replaying memories of Ethan. But as the days turned into weeks, she found a strange solace in the routine. At the cafe, Anna met an eclectic group of coworkers who slowly began to chip away at her isolation. There was Greg, the cheerful cook with a knack for terrible puns, and Mia, a single mom who worked double shifts but always had time to offer Anna a kind word. One evening, after closing up, Mia joined Anna on the cafe's back steps. The two sat in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight dance on the water. I don't know what brought you here, Mia said eventually, but you seem like someone who's been through a storm. Anna glanced at her, surprised. What makes you say that? I've seen that look before, Mia replied. You're holding on to something heavy. But trust me, this town has a way of helping people find themselves. Anna didn't reply, but as she gazed at the peaceful harbor, she felt a flicker of hope. Months passed, and Anna began to rebuild her life. She saved every tip, determined to one day move out of her small room and into a place of her own. She started taking morning walks along the beach, letting the waves wash away her lingering sadness. Slowly, the memories of Ethan and Meadowville began to fade. But life had one more surprise in store. One morning, Anna woke feeling nauseous. At first, she brushed it off as exhaustion, but when the symptoms persisted, waves of fatigue, dizziness, and an unfamiliar tenderness in her emotions, she couldn't ignore the possibility. She stopped by the pharmacy after her shift, her heart pounding as she bought a pregnancy test. Back in her room, the minutes stretched into eternity as she waited for the result. When she finally glanced at the stick in her trembling hands, the two pink lines stared back at her. Anna sat on the floor, her thoughts racing. She was pregnant. Ethan's child. Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they weren't from despair. A strange mix of fear and joy swirled within her. She was going to be a mother. I can do this, she whispered to herself, clutching the test as if it were a lifeline. I have to. Over the following days, Anna began to plan. She met with a doctor in Clearwater and started budgeting her tips with meticulous care. The thought of raising a child alone was daunting, but she was determined to give her baby a better life than she had known. Late one evening, as the sea breeze drifted through her open window, Anna placed her hand on her still flat stomach. I don't know what's ahead, she murmured, but I promise I'll do everything I can for you. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of purpose. The woman who had fled Meadowville was gone. In her place was someone stronger, ready to face the challenges ahead. Anna had no idea that her journey was about to take an even more unexpected turn. The days blurred together as Anna settled into her new life in Clearwater. The initial shock of her pregnancy began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination to keep moving forward. Her routine had become second nature, working at the cafe, taking long walks by the sea, and spending quiet evenings at home, sorting through her thoughts. The prospect of becoming a mother filled her with a mix of excitement and fear, but she had resolved that this was her future now, there would be no looking back. But one morning, as she woke up with an unfamiliar wave of nausea, Anna couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Her stomach had been queasy for days, and the tiredness that clung to her made her feel as though she were wading through water, moving slowly, every step requiring more energy than the last. She'd assumed it was just the stress of the last few months catching up with her. After all, the transition from the life she had known in Meadowville to this quiet coastal town hadn't been easy. But today, something felt different. Something was wrong. She stood unsteady, her head spinning. The smell of the coffee brewing downstairs seemed sharper, more intense. The light from the morning sun felt too bright. Maybe it's just a cold, Anna whispered to herself, but deep down, she knew. She knew what this was. As she reached for the bathroom sink, her hands shook, and a flash of dizziness overtook her. The reality of the situation crashed in. There was no denying it any longer. Her period was late. The morning sickness had only intensified. And that nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach, that quiet certainty, was there. She was pregnant. After a few moments of stunned silence, Anna shook herself free from her thoughts, and walked slowly to the small pharmacy by the harbor. It was a small, unassuming shop, lined with neatly organized shelves and the soft hum of an old fan in the background. She picked up a pregnancy test with trembling hands, the weight of her decision heavy with every step. At home, she locked the door behind her, heart pounding in her chest. She stared at the test, barely able to focus as the minutes passed like hours. When the 2 lines appeared, she let out a shaky breath. She was going to have a baby. Tears welled in her eyes, but these were different. They weren't born of grief or fear, but of the overwhelming realization that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Ethan's absence still stung, but in that moment, the small life growing inside of her became her focus. Her baby. The child she would raise, alone, yes, but with a fierce love that she had never known was possible. The next days were a blur of mixed emotions, euphoria, fear, excitement. She began to plan, knowing she had to make things work. A small smile tugged at her lips as she imagined the future, a future with her baby in a place where no one knew her past, where she could carve out her own story. The boy or girl inside of her would never know the broken promises of Ethan. They would know love, they would know stability, and most importantly, they would know the strength of their mother. But fate had a way of throwing unexpected twists into even the most carefully laid plans. 2 months passed, and Anna's life settled into a quiet rhythm. Work at the cafe had become easier, the long hours feeling like second nature now. She had rented a modest house on the outskirts of Clearwater, a little cottage with a white picket fence and a backyard that overlooked the ocean. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She had enough to pay the rent, and she could afford to make it a home for herself and her baby. The locals had grown used to Anna's presence in the cafe, the quiet woman with the distant eyes. Her pregnancy had become a topic of gentle curiosity, but no one pushed her to talk about her past. She had built a reputation as a kind and hard-working woman, and though she kept her life private, the people of Clearwater had accepted her without question. But just as things were beginning to feel like they were falling into place, fate once again had something else in mind. One Saturday afternoon, Anna took a break from work to meet Mia at the local park. Mia had offered to take her on a walk after a particularly stressful morning shift. Anna agreed, eager for the company, and they strolled along the walking path, laughing at the antics of children playing nearby. The sea breeze was gentle, carrying the scent of salt water and the promise of a warm evening. Anna's heart, lightened by the sound of Mia's laughter, felt something shift within her. She had always been a solitary person, but here, in Clearwater, she had begun to feel a sense of belonging. Still, as they walked toward the playground, something in the air changed. Mia stopped suddenly, her eyes scanning the crowd of people. "Do you see who that is?" Mia asked, her voice a little too quiet. Anna looked up, her heart skipping a beat. Across the park, standing with a group of people, was Ethan. His dark suit, crisp and perfect, seemed completely out of place in the casual, sunlit park. Anna's pulse quickened, and she froze, watching as he laughed with the group. There was no mistaking him. She would have recognized him anywhere. Ethan. Her first instinct was to turn away, to escape the situation before he saw her. But something stopped her, a strange combination of curiosity and confusion. How had he found her here, in this small town? Why was he here? Mia noticed Anna's hesitation and followed her gaze. Is that? She began, trailing off, her eyes wide with realization. Anna nodded, her stomach sinking. Yes. It's him. Ethan, as if sensing her gaze, turned around. His eyes locked onto Anna's, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. His face was a mixture of surprise and recognition, and Anna could see the hesitation in his step as he moved toward her. Mia squeezed Anna's hand, her voice low but steady. You don't have to talk to him if you don't want to. But it was too late. Ethan was already walking toward her, his footsteps slow and deliberate, as though he was unsure how to approach her after all this time. His voice was shaky when he finally spoke. Anna. His voice cracked slightly, and Anna's chest tightened. Are they mine? He asked, his eyes flickering between her and her growing belly. For a moment, Anna felt the weight of the years, the heartbreak, and the abandonment. Her throat tightened, and her breath hitched. But there was no room for doubt in her heart. Yes, Ethan, she said, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions swirling inside her. They're yours. The words hung in the air between them, and Anna felt something stir inside of her. Anger, sadness, but also the flicker of something new, something she hadn't expected. The confrontation with Ethan had left Anna shaken. That night, as she sat in the quiet solitude of her modest house, her mind raced with the memory of his stunned expression. She had expected to feel anger, perhaps even vindication, but instead, a strange numbness had taken hold. The man who had abandoned her on their wedding day now stood before her, wanting answers she wasn't sure she was ready to give. But her reality wasn't about Ethan anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. Her focus, her very reason for pushing forward, was the life, or rather, lives, growing inside her. A week after her encounter with Ethan, Anna went to her doctor for a routine checkup. She had steeled herself for the usual measurements and reassurances, but today, something felt different. The nurse smiled warmly as she prepared Anna for the ultrasound. You're a little further along than we initially thought, the nurse said. Let's take a closer look. Anna lay back, the cool gel on her stomach sending a shiver down her spine. The rhythmic beeping of the machine filled the room, and Anna held her breath as the image flickered onto the screen. Ah, the doctor said, his voice laced with surprise. Well, this is unexpected. Anna's heart raced. What? Is something wrong? The doctor smiled and turned the screen slightly so she could see. Not wrong, no. But, Anna, you're carrying quadruplets. Her mind reeled as she stared at the 4 tiny, distinct shapes on the screen. 4 heartbeats. 4 lives. She blinked, unable to process the enormity of the moment. Quadruplets? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The doctor nodded. It's rare, but not unheard of. We'll need to monitor you closely, of course. But for now, everything looks healthy. As Anna left the clinic that day, the weight of her situation felt heavier than ever. 1 baby was already a daunting challenge, 4 seemed impossible. But as she walked along the quiet streets of Clearwater, her resolve hardened. These babies were hers, and she would give them everything she had. The months that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Anna spent her mornings working at the cafe and her evenings preparing for the arrival of her children. Her small house quickly became a hub of activity as she collected cribs, baby clothes, and diapers in bulk. The people of Clearwater, charmed by her determination and warmth, rallied around her. Mia, ever the supportive friend, organized a community baby shower at the cafe. The room was decorated with streamers and balloons, and the tables were laden with gifts. Anna sat in the center, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. You're going to be an amazing mother, Mia said, handing her a small package wrapped in blue paper. Anna smiled through her tears. I hope so. I have to be. As her due date approached, the reality of her new life began to sink in. She practiced changing diapers on dolls, read every parenting book she could find, and spent hours imagining what her babies would look like. Despite her growing excitement, there were moments of fear, moments when she wondered if she was strong enough to do this alone. But those doubts faded the day her sons were born. The delivery was difficult, requiring a team of doctors and nurses to ensure everyone's safety. After hours of labor, Anna heard the cries of her first son, followed quickly by 3 more. The sound filled the room, and Anna wept as she held each of them in her arms. Jack was the first, his tiny fingers wrapping around her thumb with a surprising strength. Nathan came next, quieter and more contemplative, his wide eyes studying her face. Caleb arrived with a loud cry that quickly turned into a gurgling laugh, and Owen, the smallest but with a fierce determination, completed the quartet. As Anna looked at her sons, exhaustion melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of love. They were perfect, her boys, her world. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Each child had a distinct personality that became more evident with each passing day. Jack was curious, always reaching for new things and observing the world around him. Nathan was shy but deeply affectionate, often seeking comfort in Anna's arms. Caleb, ever the entertainer, had a knack for making his brothers laugh, and Owen, the leader, seemed to instinctively take charge, even as a newborn. Though the house was often filled with chaos, it was also filled with joy. Anna embraced the challenges of motherhood with a fierce determination, learning to juggle bottles, diapers, and bedtime stories with surprising ease. The community of Clearwater continued to support her. Marjorie, her landlord, often stopped by with meals, and Mia became an honorary aunt, helping with the boys whenever Anna needed a break. Even Greg, the cafe's cook, showed up one day with a set of hand-carved wooden toys he had made for the boys. Anna's life was far from easy, but it was full of laughter, love, and the unshakable bond she shared with her sons. One evening, as she rocked Nathan to sleep, Anna looked around the small nursery she had created. The walls were painted a soft blue, and the cribs were lined up neatly, each one filled with a sleeping baby. She felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing that she had found her purpose. Her sons were her everything, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew she would face them head-on. But as she leaned down to kiss Nathan's forehead, a thought crossed her mind, a thought she quickly pushed aside. Ethan. He was out there, somewhere. He had seen her, confronted her, and now he knew the truth. For now, he hadn't tried to interfere, but Anna couldn't shake the feeling that her quiet life in Clearwater might not remain peaceful for long. Her journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. 5 years had passed since the day Anna had learned she was carrying quadruplets. Her once quiet life in Clearwater had transformed into a whirlwind of energy and love, shaped by the unique personalities of her 4 sons. Jack, ever curious, loved building intricate block towers that Caleb, the family joker, delighted in knocking down. Nathan's gentle nature made him a natural peacemaker between his brothers, while Owen, their unspoken leader, often kept the household in check with his surprisingly mature demeanor. Anna's days were filled with work at the cafe, school drop-offs, and playdates, while her nights were spent tucking her boys into bed with stories of bravery and kindness. Though the challenges of single motherhood were immense, Anna had built a happy, stable life. It was a warm spring afternoon when that stability was shaken. Anna had taken the boys to the local park, a sprawling area with tall oak trees, winding trails, and a brightly colored playground where her sons loved to play. Jack was scaling the monkey bars, Nathan and Caleb were racing down the slide, and Owen was organizing a game of tag with a few other children. Anna sat on a bench nearby, sipping a cup of coffee and savoring the rare moment of calm as she watched her boys laugh and play. She smiled, feeling proud of the little family she had built. But her tranquility shattered when a familiar figure appeared on the path ahead. Ethan. He was unmistakable, even after all these years. His sharp suit and confident stride contrasted with the casual families around him. His hair was shorter, his face slightly older, but his presence was as commanding as ever. Anna's heart stopped, her breath catching in her throat as memories of the past flooded back. Ethan scanned the park, his gaze restless, and then it landed on her. For a moment he froze. Anna felt rooted to her seat, unable to move as his eyes widened with recognition. And then, Ethan's gaze shifted, to the boys. Jack, his face a mirror of Ethan's, was shouting encouragement to Owen as he climbed the jungle gym. Nathan's quiet smile and Caleb's mischievous grin bore undeniable traces of their father. The resemblance was too strong to miss, and Anna saw the realization dawn on Ethan's face. He began walking toward her, his steps hesitant but determined. Anna's heart pounded as she stood, her instincts urging her to gather her children and leave. But before she could act, Ethan was standing before her. "Anna," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "It's you." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Ethan." His eyes darted toward the playground again, where the boys were now chasing each other across the grass. "Are they?" He didn't finish the question, but the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. "Yes," Anna said, her voice firm despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "They're yours." Ethan's face went pale, his eyes flickering between Anna and the children. "All of them?" Anna crossed her arms, standing her ground. "All of them." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of children laughing and birds chirping filled the silence as Ethan struggled to process what he was seeing. Finally, he took a shaky breath. "Why didn't you tell me?" Anna's eyes flashed with anger. "Why didn't I tell you? You left me at the altar, Ethan. You disappeared without a word. And when I saw you sitting in that car, you couldn't even face me. Why would I tell you anything after that?" Ethan flinched, guilt flashing across his face. "Anna, Don't," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "I don't want your excuses. I've raised them on my own, and they don't need you swooping in and turning their lives upside down." Ethan's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes. "They're my children, Anna. I deserve to know them." Anna's jaw tightened. "You deserve? What about what they deserve, Ethan? Do you even know how to be a father?" Before Ethan could respond, Owen ran up to her, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom! Jack says he can climb the highest tree, but I think he'll fall." Anna knelt to his level, smoothing his hair. "Tell Jack to stay off the tall trees, okay? We don't need any broken arms today." Owen nodded and ran back to his brothers, but not before giving Ethan a curious glance. Ethan watched the boy go, his expression softening. "What's his name?" Anna hesitated before answering. "Owen. The others are Jack, Nathan, and Caleb." Ethan repeated their names under his breath, as if trying to commit them to memory. "They're incredible," he said, his voice filled with awe. "They're my world," Anna replied, her tone resolute. Ethan looked at her, his eyes pleading. "Anna, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I can't change the past, but I want to be a part of their lives. Please, just give me a chance." Anna stared at him, torn between anger and the faintest flicker of hope. She had spent years protecting her boys from the pain Ethan had caused her, and the thought of letting him back into their lives terrified her. But a small part of her wondered if her sons deserved the chance to know their father. "I need time to think," she said finally. "And until I decide, you stay away from them." Ethan nodded, his expression earnest. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait as long as it takes." As he walked away, Anna sat back on the bench, her mind racing. She watched her sons playing, their laughter echoing through the park, and wondered if her carefully built life was about to change forever. The encounter at the park lingered in Anna's mind, consuming her thoughts long after Ethan had walked away. For years she had built a fortress around her heart, a wall that shielded her and her sons from the pain of the past. But now, Ethan was back, and his presence threatened to dismantle everything she had worked so hard to protect. 2 days later, while Anna was busy at the cafe, her best friend Mia appeared with a concerned expression. She approached Anna at the counter, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no customers were listening. "He's here," Mia said in a low voice. Anna froze. "Who?" Mia didn't need to say the name. The look in her eyes said it all. "Ethan," Mia confirmed. "He's sitting by the window." Anna's heart raced as she glanced toward the corner table. There he was, dressed in a tailored shirt, looking out of place in the cozy, rustic cafe. He didn't see her at first, but when their eyes met, he gave her a small, tentative nod. "Do you want me to handle this?" Mia whispered, ready to intervene. Anna shook her head, summoning every ounce of composure she had. "No. I'll deal with him." She walked over to Ethan's table, her steps measured and deliberate. The cafe bustled around them, but the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" she asked, crossing her arms. He looked up at her, his expression earnest. "I wanted to talk to you. Privately." Anna glanced around the cafe. This was not the place for the conversation he was trying to start. "Fine. 5 minutes. Out back." Without waiting for a response, she turned and headed to the rear exit. Ethan followed her into the small alley behind the cafe, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with the salty breeze from the nearby coast. Anna spun to face him, her eyes blazing. "What do you want, Ethan? I told you I needed time." "I know," he said, holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "But I couldn't just walk away without trying to explain." "Explain?" she snapped. "Explain why you abandoned me at the altar? Why you've shown up now, after 5 years, demanding to be part of their lives." Ethan winced but didn't back down. "I didn't know about them, Anna. If I had—" "Don't," she interrupted, her voice rising. "Don't act like that changes anything. You left, Ethan. You left without a single word, and I had to pick up the pieces. I raised 4 children on my own while you—" Her voice faltered, but she quickly recovered. "While you disappeared." Ethan's expression softened. "You're right. I disappeared. And I've regretted it every day since." Anna laughed bitterly. "Regret doesn't feed 4 mouths. Regret doesn't hold a baby at 2 in the morning when they're crying. You don't get to waltz back into our lives and expect everything to be fine." "I don't expect that," Ethan said quietly. "But I want to try. I want to be their father, Anna. They deserve to know who I am." "And what if I don't think you deserve them?" she shot back. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not your decision to make alone. They're my sons too." Anna took a step closer, her voice low and fierce. "You lost the right to call them your sons when you walked away from me. You think you can just show up now and play the hero? It doesn't work that way, Ethan." He hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I know I can't undo the past. But I'm not the same man I was then. I've made mistakes, mistakes I'll regret for the rest of my life. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Anna stared at him, her emotions a whirlwind of anger, pain, and something she couldn't quite name. She wanted to believe that he had changed, that he truly cared. But could she trust him again? Before she could respond, Ethan stepped closer, his voice filled with determination. "Let me prove myself, Anna. Let me earn their trust, and yours. I'll do whatever it takes." Anna looked away, her mind racing. She thought of her sons, their laughter, their innocence. They had never asked about their father, content with the life she had built for them. But would keeping Ethan away be what was best for them? "I need to think," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded. "Take all the time you need. But please don't shut me out." He turned and walked away, leaving Anna alone in the alley. She leaned against the wall, her legs trembling as the weight of the conversation sank in. Later that night, as she tucked the boys into bed, her thoughts returned to Ethan. Jack had fallen asleep clutching a model airplane he had built, while Caleb and Nathan shared a quiet giggle over a secret only they knew. Owen, as always, gave her a solemn goodnight hug before closing his eyes. They were happy, but Anna couldn't shake the question that had been haunting her since Ethan's return. Did they need their father? She knew she couldn't avoid the answer forever. Whatever decision she made would shape the future of her family, and she had to get it right. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Anna's decision hung over her like a storm cloud, the pressure of it weighing heavily on her every moment. Ethan's persistence hadn't faltered. He had respected her wishes for time but had made it clear that he wasn't going to back down. He continued to show up at the cafe, always just far enough out of earshot to respect her space, but there was no mistaking his intention. He wanted to be part of his sons' lives. He wanted to prove that he was worthy of that role. Anna, on the other hand, remained conflicted. She wanted to protect her sons from the chaos she knew would come with letting Ethan back into their lives, but she also couldn't deny the aching truth that her boys deserved the chance to know their father. But could she trust him? After everything he had done, could she risk letting him in? It wasn't until one evening, when she was dropping her boys off at school, that she decided to seek legal advice. It was a cold morning, and as she bundled the boys into their jackets, she realized that the legal path would be her only way forward. The last thing she wanted was for Ethan to manipulate the situation, using his wealth and influence to take the boys from her. That afternoon, Anna reached out to Grace, her lawyer and longtime friend. Grace had been by her side through many of the difficult moments in her life, including the aftermath of Ethan's abandonment. If anyone could help her navigate this, it was Grace. Anna. Grace greeted her warmly when she arrived at her office. It's been a while. How are you? Anna smiled faintly. Surviving. She took a seat across from Grace's desk, trying to keep the anxiety from her voice. I need your help. Grace's brow furrowed in concern. What's going on? Anna hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Ethan, he's back. Grace's expression softened, but there was a flicker of caution in her eyes. Ethan? As in, the Ethan who left you at the altar? Anna nodded, her chest tightening at the mere mention of his name. Yes. He wants to be involved in the boys' lives. And I don't know what to do. Grace sat back in her chair, considering the situation. Have you spoken to him? I have. A few times, Anna replied, her voice tight with frustration. He says he's changed, that he regrets leaving, but how can I trust him? How do I know he's not just trying to rewrite the past and play the role of the perfect father when he didn't care at all back then? I understand, Grace said softly, her tone sympathetic. It's a huge decision, and it's clear you've been carrying this burden on your own for a long time. But legally speaking, you're in a strong position. You've raised the boys on your own for 5 years, and that matters. But he's wealthy, Anna said, her voice tinged with bitterness. He has resources. What if he tries to use his money to take them from me? Grace's face hardened. Anna, don't let that fear control you. Yes, Ethan has money, but you have something more important, your years of love and dedication to those children. The court will see that. If he wants to fight for visitation, you'll need to prove that you're the one who has been their constant, not him. And from what I know about you, you've done everything for them. He hasn't. Anna nodded slowly, feeling a flicker of hope. So you think I have a chance? Grace leaned forward, her eyes meeting Anna's with steady resolve. I don't just think you have a chance, Anna. I think you have a very strong one. Let's fight this the right way. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal paperwork and meetings. Grace worked tirelessly to build Anna's case, gathering documents, testimony from Anna's coworkers at the cafe, and even letters of support from friends in the Clearwater community. Ethan, on the other hand, had retained a high-powered attorney who specialized in family law. It was clear this wouldn't be a simple, amicable settlement. Ethan wasn't giving up without a fight, and neither was Anna. The court date arrived sooner than Anna expected. The air was thick with tension as she walked into the courthouse with Grace by her side, her sons being watched by a neighbor for the day. Ethan and his attorney were already there, sitting in the front row, and the sight of him sent a cold shiver down Anna's spine. He stood when he saw her, his eyes locking onto hers with an almost desperate intensity, but she refused to acknowledge him, focusing only on the path ahead. Inside the courtroom, the battle began. Ethan's attorney was a sharp, calculating woman, presenting Ethan's case with precision. She painted him as a man who had made a regrettable mistake but had since built a successful, stable life. She argued that his financial stability, coupled with his desire to repair his relationship with his sons, made him the better fit for parental involvement. Anna's case, however, was built on years of love, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. Grace laid out Anna's history with the children, how she had raised them with the utmost care, how she had provided for them despite the challenges. She emphasized the community support for Anna's role as a mother and the deep, irreplaceable bond between Anna and her sons. The judge listened intently, taking notes as the lawyers presented their arguments. Anna sat on the edge of her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart hammering in her chest. She kept her gaze straight ahead, refusing to look at Ethan. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her again. Just as the case seemed to be reaching its peak, an unexpected twist emerged. The courtroom doors opened, and an unfamiliar woman entered, her presence immediately drawing attention. She was tall, with sharp features and a stern expression, and she walked confidently to the front of the room. "Your Honor," she said, addressing the judge, "I have information that could change the course of this case." The woman was introduced as Margaret, Ethan's former housekeeper. Her testimony would soon turn the tide in Anna's favor. Margaret spoke of how Ethan's mother had been the one who pressured him to abandon Anna, making it clear that his actions had been manipulated by family pressure rather than his own feelings. She described how Ethan had been guilted into breaking things off with Anna, all in the name of family legacy. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as Margaret's words sank in. Ethan's attorney tried to refute her testimony, but the damage had already been done. The judge, clearly moved by Margaret's testimony, ruled that Ethan would be granted supervised visitation. It was a tentative step, just enough to allow Ethan the opportunity to prove his sincerity, but not enough to overturn Anna's role as the boy's primary caregiver. As they left the courthouse, Anna felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief. She had won this round, but she knew the battle was far from over. The road ahead would be long and fraught with uncertainty, but at least for now, she had protected her family. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. The days following the court's decision felt like a strange limbo. Anna had won the legal battle, but it was a hollow victory. Ethan had been granted supervised visits, yes, but it wasn't the full access he had hoped for. The judge's ruling had made it clear Ethan would have to prove his sincerity, and Anna's protective instincts were still firmly in place. As much as she wanted to feel victorious, there was an underlying anxiety gnawing at her. This wasn't over. Ethan might have been given a chance, but she wasn't sure if he deserved it. And the worst part was that her sons, her precious boys, might get their hopes up. What would it mean for them if Ethan didn't stick around this time, just like he hadn't before? Her thoughts were interrupted when the phone rang late one evening. Anna's heart skipped a beat when she saw the name on the screen, Ethan. For a moment, she thought about ignoring it, letting it go to voicemail. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the tone in his voice the day they'd left court, or maybe it was the desperate need for closure that had been simmering in her for years. With a deep breath, she answered. "Hello? Anna, it's Ethan." His voice was quiet, tentative. "I know it's late, but I wanted to speak with you." Anna's hand tightened around the phone. "What is it, Ethan? I've been thinking about everything, the court, the boys, and I want to do this right. I know I can't just waltz back into your life and expect everything to be perfect. I've made a mess of things, and I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. But I want to make it right." There was something in his voice, something more genuine than she had ever heard before. Anna hesitated, not knowing what to say. She had been expecting him to come with promises, apologies, and empty words, but this felt different. "Why now?" she asked, her voice more vulnerable than she intended. "Why after all this time?" Ethan was silent for a moment, and Anna could almost hear the weight of his thoughts on the other end of the line. "Because I can't keep running from this. I've been running from it for too long, Anna. I need to be part of their lives. But I understand if you don't want that. If you can't forgive me." Anna's chest tightened. She had been waiting for this, for him to show her who he really was, to prove that he could be the man she had once loved. But she couldn't let herself be swept away by the rush of emotions, not when so much was at stake. "I can't forgive you for what you did, Ethan," she said, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "But I can't ignore the fact that the boys deserve the chance to know you. You can't just come in and expect them to accept you. They've been through enough, and I've been their only constant." "I know," Ethan replied softly. "And I don't expect them to accept me right away. I'm willing to do the work. I just need you to trust me, give me a chance to show them, to show you, that I can be the father they deserve." Anna closed her eyes, fighting the conflicting emotions swirling inside her. She didn't want to be vulnerable again, didn't want to expose herself to more heartache. But she also knew that deep down, Ethan was telling the truth. He was finally ready to be a father. The question was whether it was too late. "Okay," she said after a long pause. "We'll start slow. But it's going to be on my terms. And if you let me down again, I won't hesitate to protect them from you." "I understand," Ethan said quickly. "And I promise, Anna, I won't let you down again." The line went quiet, and Anna felt the weight of her decision settle around her. She had just taken a huge step, opening the door to Ethan after years of silence and pain. But she had done it for her sons, for their future, for their happiness. The next few days were filled with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Anna kept a close watch on her sons, gauging their reactions as she told them about their father's return. Jack, the most sensitive of the four, was the first to ask questions. "Will he come and play with us?" Jack asked, his big brown eyes wide with curiosity. Anna hesitated, wondering how to explain the situation without causing confusion or disappointment. "He will, sweetie. He's going to start spending some time with you, but it's going to be slow at first. He has to prove that he can be a part of your lives." Nathan, ever the quiet one, looked down at his shoes, clearly processing the information. Caleb, the joker, jumped up and down, his excitement bubbling over. "That's awesome! I bet he's going to teach us all sorts of cool stuff." Owen, the oldest and most protective, didn't say anything at first. He just stared at his mother, his brow furrowed as he tried to make sense of the news. Finally, he spoke. "Is he going to stay with us?" Owen's voice was steady, but Anna could hear the wariness in it. "No, honey," she said softly. "Not yet. He's just going to come by for short visits, and we'll see how it goes. I don't want you to get your hopes up too high, okay?" Owen nodded, but the uncertainty in his eyes told Anna everything she needed to know. This wasn't just about her and Ethan anymore. It was about them, about her boys, and she had to be careful. They had been through so much already, and they were still so young. That weekend, Ethan arrived at Anna's house for his first supervised visit. He was nervous, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket as he approached the front door. Anna opened it, and for the first time in years she saw a man who was unsure of his place. Gone was the confident, arrogant man who had left her without a second thought. In his place stood someone who looked like he was walking into the unknown, unsure of where he belonged. "Hi," Ethan said, his voice tentative. "Hi," Anna replied, her heart pounding. Behind her, the boys were scattered in the living room, unsure of what to expect. Ethan shifted on his feet, glancing at them but not quite making eye contact. "I'm here to spend time with you," he said quietly. "If that's okay." Jack, who had always been the more open and trusting of the boys, took a few tentative steps forward. "You're our dad, right?" Ethan nodded, his throat tightening. "Yes, Jack. I'm your dad." There was a pause, and then Caleb, ever the playful one, darted over to Ethan and tugged on his sleeve. "Will you teach us how to play soccer?" Ethan smiled, a real smile this time. "I'd love to." And just like that, the ice began to crack. Ethan bent down to play with Caleb, and soon the other boys joined in. For a moment, Anna allowed herself to watch from the doorway, her heart swelling with cautious hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. A small step toward healing, a small step toward bridging the gap between the past and the future. But she knew that this wasn't the end of the story. The journey ahead would be long and complicated. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt and pain. But Anna was determined to see it through, for herself, for her sons, and for Ethan. She had promised her boys that she would protect them, and that meant taking this one step at a time. For now, though, she allowed herself to breathe. They had taken the first step forward, and that was enough. The weeks that followed Ethan's first visit were a mix of tentative progress and lingering suspicion. Anna watched as he tried to fit into the puzzle of their lives, like a piece that didn't quite belong, but was determined to make it work. Her sons, in their youthful innocence, had opened their hearts to him, cautiously at first, but they were warming to the idea of having their father around. Jack's curiosity and Nathan's quiet hope made Ethan's visits more frequent, and even Caleb and Owen, though still wary, began to show signs of acceptance. But Anna's heart remained guarded. She watched every interaction, every word exchanged, scrutinizing Ethan's every move. She couldn't afford to let herself fall for his promises again, especially after all that had happened. The memories of the broken promises, the pain of being left alone at the altar, were still raw. She couldn't forget how he had walked away from her and their future, unable to understand how deeply that had cut her. It was on one of these visits, a warm Saturday afternoon, when the truth came to light. Anna was sitting on the porch, watching her boys chase each other around the yard, their laughter filling the air. She had become accustomed to these moments, to the life they had built without Ethan, a life that, though imperfect, was hers. And yet, as she observed her sons playing with their father, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. There were too many unanswered questions, too many things left unsaid. Ethan had promised transparency, but he had yet to explain the full depth of his reasons for leaving her, for choosing his mother over their love. He had apologized, yes, but the words felt insufficient. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the scene, Anna knew it was time to confront him. She stood up from her chair, feeling the weight of the conversation ahead. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward Ethan, who was leaning against the fence, watching the boys with a smile. His expression softened when he saw her approaching. "Hey," he said, his voice warm but hesitant. "Ethan," Anna began, her voice steady but her heart racing. "We need to talk." His brow furrowed slightly, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What's wrong?" "I've been patient," she replied, taking a step closer. "I've been giving you the space to prove yourself, to show me that you're not the man who abandoned me at the altar. But there's something I still don't understand." She paused, her gaze unwavering as she met his eyes. "Why? Why did you leave me, Ethan? What made you walk away?" For a moment, Ethan's face clouded over, the guarded expression he had worn for so long returning. He looked down at the ground, and Anna saw his hands tremble slightly. I didn't want to leave you, Anna," he said, his voice rough. "But my mother, she didn't give me a choice. She said if I married you, she would cut me off. All of the money, the inheritance, everything I had worked for, everything I was supposed to inherit, it would be gone. She made it clear that if I chose you, I would lose everything." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and guilt evident on his face. "I couldn't risk that, Anna. I didn't know how to balance it. I thought, maybe, if I let you go, I could fix things. I could keep my family's legacy intact." Anna's chest tightened as she processed his words. She had always suspected his mother had played a part in his decision, but hearing it from Ethan himself made it feel all the more real. The woman who had caused so much destruction in their lives had manipulated her son into choosing loyalty to wealth over the woman he claimed to love. "But why didn't you fight for us, Ethan?" Anna whispered, her voice breaking. "You could have fought. You could have told her that I was worth it. But instead you left me. You left us." She fought to keep her composure, but the hurt she had buried for so long threatened to surface. Ethan's face twisted in anguish. "I was scared, Anna. I thought I could make it work without you. I thought I could get by without you, without us. But the truth is, I've been miserable. I've regretted every single day I wasn't with you and the boys. And when I finally realized that, I had to come back. But I know it's too late." Anna stepped back, her mind racing. His words were filled with regret, but they didn't undo the past. The hurt, the betrayal, it was still there, lingering between them. She didn't know how to process this new version of the man who had once promised her the world, only to shatter it with his silence. She turned to look at her sons, who were still playing in the yard, unaware of the conversation taking place. For the first time, she realized that Ethan's actions weren't just about her, they were about them, too. "I can't just forgive you, Ethan," Anna said, her voice raw. "Not yet. Not after everything you've done. But I also know that my boys deserve to know you, to understand who you are. They need a father, whether you're ready to be one or not." She wiped a tear from her cheek, her heart heavy with the burden of the decision. "But you need to understand something. I won't let you hurt them again. If you can't prove to me that you're here to stay, if you can't show me that you're going to fight for them, then I won't let you in their lives. Not like this. Not half-heartedly." Ethan nodded, his face crumpling with emotion. "I understand, Anna. I'll prove it to you. I'll do whatever it takes." Anna didn't know if she believed him yet, but for the first time in years, she could see the man who had once been her partner in the eyes of the father of her children. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She wasn't sure where this road would lead, but at least they were walking it together, one cautious step at a time. As the evening wore on and the boys came inside, exhausted and happy, Anna watched them with a quiet sense of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late for them to have the family they deserved. Maybe, just maybe, they could start again. But for now, Anna knew the most important thing: she had taken a step toward healing, toward understanding, toward forgiveness. The future was still uncertain, but it was no longer as bleak as it had once seemed. She couldn't change the past, but she could control what came next. And so, with the weight of the past still heavy on her shoulders, Anna made a silent vow: she would do whatever it took to protect her boys. No matter what. The weeks after their conversation were an uneasy dance of cautious steps and tentative trust. Anna had drawn the line. Ethan had crossed it, left them behind, and now the only way forward was through rebuilding the fragments of their broken past. And so, day by day, they forged a new path together, but the landscape was still treacherous, filled with remnants of old wounds. At first, it wasn't easy. Anna kept her distance, emotionally and physically, carefully observing Ethan as he tried to integrate himself into their lives. He had promised to stay and prove himself, but his words, as heartfelt as they were, couldn't erase the years of absence. But Ethan was determined. He spent every free moment with the boys, throwing himself into the mundane tasks of fatherhood. He helped Jack with his school projects, taught Nathan how to ride a bike, played baseball in the yard with Caleb, and built elaborate Lego structures with Owen. Little by little, the boys began to accept him, not as the man who had abandoned them, but as the man who was finally trying to make amends. For Anna, though, it wasn't that simple. Each time she saw him interact with their children, a flicker of hope would surge in her chest, only to be followed by the weight of past hurt. She knew he was trying, and there was a part of her that appreciated it, but forgiveness was not a switch she could flip. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the yard, Ethan sat with Anna on the porch. The boys were inside, winding down after a long day. The silence between them was heavy, but there was something new in the air, a quiet understanding that hadn't existed before. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice soft. "I know it's not enough, Anna. I know I can't undo the years I lost. But I'll keep trying. I'll keep showing up for you and the boys, no matter how long it takes. I've got nothing left but this family. And I won't give it up." Anna turned her head to look at him, her eyes searching his face for any trace of the man who had once been so sure of himself, the man who had walked away from her without a second thought. But now, the man before her was broken in a way that made him seem more real, more human. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Why didn't you fight for me? For us? Ethan took a deep breath, as though the words weighed on him, something that had been gnawing at his conscience for years. He looked away, his eyes distant. I was scared, Anna. I thought I could build a life without you, that I could survive without you. But every day without you felt like I was suffocating. I thought if I chose my mother's side, I'd be able to fix everything. I thought the money, the status, the life she promised me. I thought it would fill the emptiness. But it didn't. Nothing ever did. Anna's heart ached as she listened to him. There was a sincerity in his voice that she hadn't heard before. This was the man who had loved her once, and who, despite everything, still seemed to want her in his life. I believed in us, Ethan, Anna said softly, her voice raw with emotion. I believed that love was enough. But I had to learn the hard way that love isn't always enough. Not when it's tested like we were tested. Ethan nodded, his eyes full of remorse. I know. And I'm sorry, Anna. I'm so sorry for everything. I failed you. But I can't change that. All I can do now is show you that I'm here. That I'm committed to making this right. A long silence stretched between them, the weight of their shared past lingering like a heavy fog. Anna didn't know if she could ever fully forgive him. But in that moment, she realized that holding onto the past, onto the pain, was only keeping her from moving forward. And for the sake of her boys, and for herself, she needed to let go. I'm not saying it will be easy, Anna finally said, her voice low. But I'm willing to try, Ethan. For the boys. For us. But this time, we take it slow. One step at a time. No more rushing. No more promises that can't be kept. Ethan's face softened with relief. I understand. And I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not going anywhere. As the evening wore on, the bond between them, fragile and tentative as it was, began to form once again, slowly, carefully. It wasn't the same bond they had once shared, but it was a start. They weren't the same people they had been before, but that didn't mean they couldn't build something new. Something real. The next few weeks saw gradual improvements. Ethan's presence in the boys' lives became more consistent, and Anna began to allow herself to trust him again, bit by bit. It wasn't a smooth road. There were moments of doubt, moments when the past seemed too heavy to bear. But with each passing day, there was a growing sense that something had shifted between them. Not just in Ethan, but in Anna as well. She was no longer the broken woman who had stood at the altar, waiting for the love of her life to show up. She was stronger now, more resilient, and she had created a life for herself and her children that didn't rely on anyone else. Ethan's return, while complicated, was just another piece of the puzzle. And then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Ethan arrived at the house, carrying a wooden box under his arm. He had a look of nervous excitement on his face, and when Anna opened the door, he handed it to her with a sheepish smile. What's this? Anna asked, surprised by the gesture. Open it, he urged, his voice eager. Anna took the box, carefully lifting the lid. Inside was a collection of small, hand-carved figurines, each one a representation of one of their sons. Jack, Nathan, Caleb, and Owen, each lovingly sculpted from wood, with intricate details that made them seem alive. Anna's heart swelled as she lifted them one by one, feeling the weight of the gesture. It wasn't just a gift, it was an apology. A symbol of his desire to be part of their family, not just as a father, but as a man who was committed to creating something real. They're beautiful, Anna whispered, fighting back tears. Ethan smiled, his eyes full of vulnerability. I wanted to make something for them. Something they could keep, something to show them I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. And for the first time in a long while, Anna believed him. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. In the quiet of the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world seemed to pause for just a moment, Anna allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future that was built on forgiveness, love, and the promise of a new beginning. A new bond. The warmth of the summer sun hung lazily in the air, casting long shadows across the meadow where Anna and Ethan stood, just beyond the perimeter of the park. The sounds of the children playing and laughing in the distance, their carefree joy marking the essence of a perfect afternoon, contrasted with the quiet intensity between the two adults. It had been months since Ethan had reappeared in their lives, but despite the growing bond, there remained an unspoken tension between them, a thread pulled taut, waiting for the slightest tug to either unravel or snap. Ethan looked at Anna, his expression contemplative, as if he had something heavy on his mind. She could see it in the way he carried himself now, more relaxed, more present, but there was also a trace of uncertainty. His movements, though natural, were careful, as if he were navigating unfamiliar ground. They had taken tentative steps forward, but the shadow of their past still loomed large. It wasn't that Anna hadn't forgiven him, but rather that the future seemed as fragile as glass, teetering on the edge of what might have been and what could be. After a few moments of quiet reflection, Ethan spoke. "Anna, I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I've also realized that we have a chance here. A real chance to make this work. And I don't want to waste it." Anna gave him a soft but knowing look. Her eyes, deep with both wisdom and weariness, met his. The years apart had taught her that some things could be fixed, and some things just had to be accepted. She had fought for herself, for her boys, and now, the fight was to decide what she truly wanted for their future. For her, Ethan's return had been a hope dashed and then rekindled, but it wasn't enough to simply exist alongside each other. She needed to know, really know, that this time was different. Ethan took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for something monumental. "Anna," he began again, his voice lower, softer. "I don't expect you to say yes. I don't even know if I deserve to ask this, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "What I do know is that I love you. I love our boys. And I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the time I lost. If you'll have me." His hands trembled slightly as he opened the box, revealing a delicate ring that caught the light, sending soft sparks of brilliance across the meadow. The ring was simple yet elegant, a modest band set with a single diamond. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect in its own way, much like the life he hoped to build with her. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the ring, her mind racing. The weight of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, it was all so overwhelming. It felt like the culmination of everything they had been through, and yet, in that moment, she didn't know what to say. The past was heavy on her heart, but so was the undeniable truth that something had changed between them. Something real had taken root. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper, almost as though he was afraid of what he might hear in her response. "Anna, I know I've hurt you, and I can't erase that. But I can promise you that from now on, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. To be the man you deserve." Her heart beat painfully in her chest as she looked at him, the man who had once broken her heart, and was now standing before her, vulnerable, hopeful, asking for a second chance. For so long, she had held on to the anger, the betrayal, but now, in the face of his sincerity, she felt it start to dissipate. She had spent years afraid of opening herself up again, afraid that trusting him would be a mistake. But deep down, she realized that life, love, wasn't about living in the safety of what was comfortable. It was about taking risks, even when the path ahead was uncertain. "I don't know what to say, Ethan," Anna whispered, her voice shaky. "You've given me so many reasons to hate you, but now you're giving me a reason to believe again. To believe in us." Ethan swallowed hard, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'll spend my whole life showing you that I'm worth believing in. If you give me the chance." The silence between them stretched, heavy with possibility. And then, slowly, almost as if testing the waters of her own emotions, Anna reached for the ring, her fingers brushing his. She hesitated, but only for a moment, before her hand closed around it. "I can't promise you that I'll forget everything," she said, her voice gaining strength. "But I can promise you that I'll try. We'll try. Together. For the boys. For us." Ethan exhaled the breath he'd been holding, his eyes shining with relief. He gently took her hand, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, just as it was meant to. "I don't need you to forget," he said quietly. "I just need you to trust me. To trust that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Tears welled up in Anna's eyes, but she blinked them back, a soft smile curving her lips. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "We'll take it slow. We'll take it one day at a time. But I believe we can make it work." The moment felt sacred, like a promise made not just between two people, but between hearts that had weathered storms and were now ready to find calm. They stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by the vibrant colors of the wildflowers that dotted the field. The breeze carried the sweet scent of spring, and for the first time in a long while, Anna felt a sense of peace settle over her. As they walked back toward the children, who were laughing and calling to each other, Anna glanced down at her hand, where the ring now rested. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of everything they had survived. It was a promise of something new, something better. It was a second chance. And as they rejoined their sons, who excitedly crowded around them, Anna realized that the future they were building wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about growth, love, and the courage to face whatever came next, together. The day was fading, but the light in Anna's heart had never been brighter. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a happy ending. A true beginning, with a man who was finally ready to be the partner she deserved, and children who now had both of their parents back. The story of their love, of forgiveness, redemption, and the chance to rewrite their future, was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The chapel was bathed in golden light, its high ceilings and stained glass windows casting colorful patterns across the polished marble floors. It was a scene Anna had once imagined for her wedding day, so many years ago, when she had walked into this very building, full of hope and promise, only to leave with her heart shattered. Yet now, standing at the threshold once again, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This time, the past no longer had a hold over her. It had been a painful journey, but it had led her here, to this moment. Ethan stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on her, his expression filled with both reverence and excitement. His suit was well-tailored, a contrast to the nervous young man who had once abandoned her. He had changed, deeply, profoundly. And now, with a strength and certainty she hadn't seen before, he was ready to take the next step. Ready to make a new life with her. As Anna walked toward him, her sons lined the aisle, their little suits perfect for the occasion. Jack, Nathan, Caleb, and Owen, now older, taller, each with their own distinct personality, were beaming with joy. Jack grinned mischievously, while Nathan, always the shy one, blushed as he straightened his tie. Caleb was trying to suppress a giggle, and Owen was simply the proud big brother, holding his younger siblings' hands with quiet dignity. They had become a family in the truest sense of the word, not defined by blood alone, but by the love and experiences they had shared. As Anna approached Ethan, her heart swelled with emotion. She thought of the years spent alone, of the hardship and struggles, and of the incredible strength she had found within herself. But now, as she looked at the man she once thought she could never forgive, and the life they had built, she realized how far they had come. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been perfect, but it had been real. And it was theirs. Ethan's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "You look beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Anna smiled, her voice trembling as she responded, "So do you." They stood together, side by side, their hands joined as the priest began the ceremony. As he spoke of love and commitment, Anna couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. The journey that had once seemed so uncertain now felt like the natural next step in a story they were writing together, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of a future either of them had imagined all those years ago. The vows were simple but heartfelt. Ethan spoke of his love for her, of his regret for the past, and of his desire to spend every day of the rest of his life making things right. Anna, her voice soft but unwavering, promised to love him, to support him, and to trust him with their future, no matter what challenges they might face. She spoke of forgiveness, not just for Ethan, but for herself. She had forgiven him, but more importantly, she had forgiven herself for the years of anger and resentment that had kept her from truly living. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan leaned in to kiss her, and the applause that followed was both joyous and cathartic. The years of pain, of loss, and of uncertainty had led them here, together, with their children by their side. The reception that followed was a celebration like no other. It wasn't grand or lavish, but it was perfect in its simplicity. The evening was filled with laughter, music, and the sound of children playing. Anna watched as Ethan interacted with the boys, his ease with them a testament to how far they had come. They had grown together, not just as a couple, but as a family. The boys had their own bond with Ethan, one that had been forged slowly but steadily, based on his genuine effort to be a part of their lives. For Anna, seeing them all together was the greatest gift of all. She had once feared that she would never find happiness again, but now, surrounded by the love of her children and the man who had become her partner in every sense, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. Her heart, once shattered, now beat in sync with the future they were building, a future where they were no longer defined by the mistakes of the past, but by the love they shared. Later in the evening, after the last of the guests had left, and the boys had been tucked into bed, Anna and Ethan stood on the balcony of their home, looking out at the stars. The night was quiet, the air cool against their skin. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, together, watching the sky. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to make up for the time I lost. But I promise, Anna, I'll never stop trying." Anna turned to him, her eyes soft with love and understanding. "You don't have to make up for anything. We've already made it through. We have our family, our life, and that's all that matters." She smiled, the years of pain and uncertainty slipping away in the presence of the man she had chosen, the family they had created. Together, they had built something beautiful out of the ashes of the past. And though they both knew there would be challenges ahead, they also knew that they would face them together. As Anna leaned into Ethan's embrace, she whispered, "This is just the beginning." And with that, they looked out at the horizon, knowing that whatever the future held, they were ready to face it, together. In the end, Anna and Ethan's journey wasn't defined by the past, but by their ability to rebuild, to forgive, and to love. Through all the heartache, the anger, and the uncertainty, they found a way back to each other, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. Their love story became a testament to the power of second chances, the beauty of family, and the strength found in vulnerability. As they stood side by side, hand in hand, they realized that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had already won the most important victory of all: their love, their family, and the future they would now build together. And so, their story continued, a new chapter beginning, filled with endless possibilities. The past may have shaped them, but it was the future they chose to create that would define them. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey, and for listening to the story until the very end. We truly appreciate your time and attention. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to give us a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on our future videos. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more amazing stories. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next one.